I mentioned this before, but I have to always reiterate it. If you don't have standards for your diet, meaning I don't eat this, I focus my diet on fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. When you go to the market now, it'll say plant-based, but I read labels. When I turn it on the back and look at the label, I'm like, half of that ain't plants. How can this be plant-based? The trickery that they put in the system now, how they deviled up food and convinced us that we're eating healthy, but we're not eating healthy, and we don't understand the damage that we're doing to our bodies. So many symptoms, like we pacify them. I got a headache. Headache is normal. But you don't have a excedrin deficiency. You got a problem. Like, that's your body telling you something is wrong.
Food is killing people.
Oh yeah, it's definitely killing people. They don't teach us how to prevent disease. They don't teach us how to heal ourselves. They teach us how to treat ourselves. And treatment is different from healing. And so really what doctors, the only thing that they're gonna give you is prescription drugs. Prescription drugs are patented. You can't patent nature. And because you can't patent nature, you can't make no money off of it. They're never gonna incentivize people to eat healthy, take these herbs, give them a grocery store list.
For decades, we've trusted that the food on our plates is safe, carefully regulated, and free from harm. But the truth is something else. Billions of people are unknowingly consuming poison every single day. And it's not just an exaggeration. It's a chilling reality that's hiding in plain sight. For example, glyphosate, a chemical so pervasive it's been called the world's most widely used herbicide, has quietly infiltrated our food supply. From the fresh produce on your table to the bread in your pantry, this toxic chemical is everywhere. And while regulators and corporations reassure us it's safe, mounting evidence paints a far darker picture. What's more alarming? Few people are talking about the catastrophic health risks it poses, from cancer to chronic disease. In today's video, Dr. Bobby Price pulls back the curtain on how glyphosate became a hidden ingredient in our everyday meals and reveals the shocking truth about its deadly consequences. If you value your health, you'll want to hear this. It all starts with glyphosate. It's the main ingredient in Roundup, that popular weed killer you see everywhere. Farmers love it because it's super effective at keeping crops free of weeds. But while it's great for killing plants, it's not so great for us, because glyphosate doesn't just disappear after it's sprayed. It sticks around, clings to crops, and eventually makes its way into the food we eat. Not just genetically modified crops like corn and soybeans, even non-GMO stuff like wheat, oats, barley, and lentils can carry glyphosate residue. Ever wondered why some cereals or granola bars taste too good to be true? Well, they might come with an unwanted extra, glyphosate. And it's not just breakfast foods. Bread, pasta, hummus, snacks, even beer and wine? Yep, they've all tested positive for it in the lab. But what does glyphosate do to us? First off, it messes with your gut, the core of your health. Our gut is home to trillions of bacteria that help us digest food, fight off diseases, and even regulate mood. And glyphosate acts like an antibiotic, but not in a good way. It wipes out the good bacteria while letting the bad ones run wild. Now guess what happens? It leads to all sorts of problems: leaky gut, inflammation, autoimmune issues, and even mental health struggles like anxiety or depression. But the trouble doesn't stop there. Glyphosate also makes your gut lining weaker, letting harmful stuff slip into your bloodstream. This can trigger joint pain, allergies, chronic fatigue, you name it. And then there's oxidative stress, which basically means your cells get damaged faster than your body can repair them. Over time, this can lead to aging, cancer, and organ problems. And finally, there's some seriously alarming news. A recent study found that glyphosate can mess with brain development too, especially in kids. It can interfere with nerve growth and even disrupt how brain cells communicate with each other. The result? Learning problems, memory issues, mood swings, and motor coordination troubles. So, do you think glyphosate is safe now? But you're pouring yourself a bowl of cereal in the morning, or grabbing a slice of bread for a quick snack, and that's how, with those healthy dishes, you are having glyphosate on a daily basis.
When you think about healing yourself, you have to remember, like, this body is a living thing. The body's gonna recognize something real versus if you eating hot Takis, that's not real food. Your body gonna have to figure out what to do with that. And if your body can't figure out what to do with it, it can't digest it. If it can't break it down, it can't take any nutrients out of it. So even if it has nutrients on the label, it can't abstract those nutrients. And it's also gonna be very difficult to eliminate it, meaning like you've eaten this food and now it can't go out of the body. So now you got 10 to 25 pounds of undigested fecal matter rotting, fermenting in your gut, and people call it a fupa or a belly. Really what it is, you full of shit.
Your only ally while buying foods are food labels, but they'll tell you about sugar, fat, and calories. But there's zero mention of glyphosate or any pesticide residues ever. You'd never know it's there unless you dig into some independent research. And when those researchers have checked popular brands, they've found traces of glyphosate in loads of everyday products. Even though it's under the legal limit, many experts are side-eyeing those limits, especially when we're exposed to this stuff over years. What's scary is how this hits kids the hardest. Think about it. Cereal, crackers, granola bars. Kids munch on this stuff all the time, and that means they're getting more of the exposure. And while some studies say it's fine, others are linking long-term exposure to health problems like hormone issues, and worse, cancer. A few brands are starting to slap on glyphosate-free labels, but those are rare and often pricey. Still, they are our only choices. Otherwise, we are literally in danger. Because glyphosate is everywhere in modern food, a 2016 study called it one of the most used chemicals worldwide, and scientists are getting more curious about how it affects people and the environment. The CDC even found it in 80% of the urine samples they tested, kids included. You'd be shocked to know that it's shown up in breast milk, baby formula, oatmeal, and hummus too. It's hard to avoid. The chemical's been at the center of a lot of debates and lawsuits, mostly about whether it causes cancer. Some studies, like one from the University of Washington in 2019, suggest it increases the risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma by 41%. Though most health agencies, including the EPA, Health Canada, and their European and Australian counterparts, are still looking for some more solid evidence. On the flip side, the World Health Organization's cancer research team labeled it as probably carcinogenic back in 2015, which kicked off a flood of lawsuits. Bayer, the company that owns Monsanto, ended up settling a ton of those cases for over $10 billion, but not all of them. Some are still hanging in limbo, and a judge even shot down a $2 billion plan to deal with future claims. So, what's the deal with non-Hodgkin lymphoma? It's one of the most common cancers in the US, with over 81,000 new cases popping up every year.
What would you do if you had cancer?
I would immediately get out of America because this is a stressful environment and stress causes cancer to exacerbate. Leave here, go somewhere indigenous where I can be around fruits, vegetables, easy. I would immediately start juicing, not eating. The thing you want to do is you want to starve cancer because you can feed cancer. And one of the primary things you can feed cancer with is sugar. I want to starve it by first not eating any kind of sugar. And then I want my body to be in such a healthy state. So I'm going to juice a lot so I can keep my body in a rested state so it can use all of the energy it would be breaking down food with to heal, regenerate, and repair.
The tricky thing is, we don't really know what causes most of them. There are some risk factors though, like being older, being male, having a family history of it, and being exposed to certain chemicals like glyphosate. People with weakened immune systems or autoimmune diseases like lupus or celiac disease also face higher risks. So, nobody knows when you or your dear ones are going to be the next victim. Even if we forget the risk of cancer or lymphoma for the moment, glyphosate destroys the bacteria in your guts, as we mentioned a while ago. You know, the trillions of tiny organisms that help keep us healthy, they play a huge role in digestion, immunity, and even our mood.
Food creates mood. The same way when you turn a box on its label and you start looking at all of those ingredients, and none of them sound like food. They sound like chemistry. I was a chemistry major in undergrad. And so when I look at a food label, I'm like, wait, that same ingredient is in pink dinner. And this is children's cereal. And so as you start to look at these, you understand that the gut is very connected to the brain. And so because you're affecting the gut, you're causing damage damage to the brain.
Turns out, some of these bacteria use the same shikimate pathway that glyphosate targets, so it could be killing off the good guys, like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, while letting the bad ones thrive. That's what researchers call gut dysbiosis. Let me tell you one interesting thing which is equally dreadful as well. Most studies testing this theory use doses of glyphosate way higher than what people are usually exposed to, so no one was sure what happens at everyday levels. To figure this out, scientists give mice drinking water with glyphosate at doses similar to what's considered safe for humans. Over a few months, they checked the mice's gut bacteria and overall health. The results? Even at low doses, glyphosate caused some serious shifts in the gut microbiome. The beneficial bacteria were wiped out. The mice had less of those good fatty acids that keep things running smoothly, and their guts became inflamed. Think higher pH levels, and more markers of inflammation like lipocalin-2. This study shows that even the so-called safe levels of glyphosate are harmful enough in the long term. Now, you might wonder, if we might know all these, doesn't the FDA know about this? Certainly they do know. Some studies, like the one from Torretta et al., raised a lot of red flags about glyphosate before. It's not just the environment getting hit, but our health too. But still, the GM industry insists that spraying GM crops with Roundup is harmless, even though there's no solid science to back that up. A study by Swanson and others even showed a connection between the increase in Roundup use and the rise of chronic illnesses in the US, despite a ruling in Europe that says all the ingredients in pesticide products need to be evaluated. This doesn't always happen. Even the newer versions of Roundup, which are marketed as less toxic, still have harmful substances like heavy metals and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, things that are supposed to be banned in the EU. But the funny part is, both Europe and the US regulatory bodies are shy enough to ban this, and they often side with the pesticide and GM industries. In Europe, glyphosate's approval got extended in 2017, but the process has been slow and controversial. A new evaluation is happening, but it looks like they're leaning toward calling it safe again. This slow process is made worse by the fact that many of the studies used to approve glyphosate are funded by the companies that make it. Some scientists have even criticized these agencies for relying on industry-sponsored research while ignoring independent studies that raise concerns. You see, capitalism just took over everything. Here's where things get really frustrating. Regulatory bodies like the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, and the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, have been criticized for conflicts of interest. They often rely on studies sponsored by the companies selling the stuff and brush aside independent research. It's no wonder people are starting to lose trust in these agencies. In the US, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, are supposed to keep our food safe. The EPA sets limits for pesticide residues on food, and the FDA makes sure those limits are followed. But there have been failures here too. A report by Gillum in 2017 pointed out how much influence companies like Monsanto have over US academics and regulators, making it harder to regulate glyphosate. The Detox Project tested a bunch of foods and found high levels of glyphosate residue, including some as high as 1150 parts per billion in whole wheat bread. But the EPA still insists glyphosate is safe when used as directed. Glyphosate also accumulates in the soil, which can harm plant growth, reduce photosynthesis, and mess with the soil's microorganisms. Plus, Monsanto's own early tests on animals showed that glyphosate could damage kidneys and other organs, and later studies suggested it could even cause tumors. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen, linking it to cancers like non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The evidence continues to pile up, showing that glyphosate and Roundup are causing real harm to both our health and the environment. But companies and regulatory bodies are mostly interested in profits. And that's why every individual like you and me has to be cautious about what we will eat or what we won't to protect our own health. Dr. Bobby Price has been sounding the alarm about the long-term effects of constantly being exposed to glyphosate. What's scary is that the damage from glyphosate doesn't show up right away. It builds up over time. And after years of eating foods contaminated with it, the effects start to hit hard. And there's no looking back then. One of the big things Dr. Price talks about is how glyphosate can mess with your immune system. Over time, it messes with the bacteria in your gut, and when that gets thrown off, it can lead to autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, or even multiple sclerosis. It's like glyphosate is slowly breaking down your body's ability to fight off diseases, which makes you more vulnerable to things like chronic inflammation. Then there's the whole issue with reproductive health. Glyphosate can interfere with hormones, which messes with things like fertility. For women, it can mess with your ovaries, your menstrual cycle, and even your ability to carry a pregnancy. Even the newborn might develop autism or ADHD.
No child comes out with autism. It develops. It develops around 2 and the age 3. And when you start to think about the amount of toxicity they're getting and the type of foods they're getting, I mean, it starts with baby formula because most people unfortunately aren't breastfeeding anymore. The breast milk enforces their immune system. So if nobody's breastfeeding and then you're feeding your baby formula for the first year, that isn't natural. And then they go straight into processed food. You got to understand how damaging that is for a 2 to 3 year period. For an adult like us, it's different when we're eating that. We have developed detoxification organs. We have a developed immune system, fully developed brain. But when you're eating this before your brain has even developed, your gut has fully developed, your immune system is fully developed, it's like setting all your wealth out on the porch. You're bound to lose something. The unfortunate thing is the way we think about food in box, cans, jars, bags, that's not food, but we've been duped into thinking that it is food.
But as we just said, even breast milk isn't safe anymore from glyphosate. So, the real danger isn't just from one meal or one exposure. It's the years of constantly eating food that's been sprayed with glyphosate. Still, glyphosate is a farmer's go-to for a reason. It's super efficient and easy on the wallet. Imagine this. It knocks out weeds without messing up the crops, so farmers can focus on growing more food instead of battling weeds all day. It saves them time, cuts down on labor, and helps them get bigger harvests. Plus, it's a huge money saver, which is why it's so popular. In fact, it's become such a staple in farming that it's hard to imagine modern agriculture without it. And that way, the food industry also makes a huge profit, kind of having a monopoly on this thing. So, if we suddenly ask them to ban it, it's likely they won't do it. Rather, it's you who can do one thing. You can turn to organic farming. If you're wondering why organic crops are mostly free of glyphosate, here's the reason. Organic farming rules are pretty strict when it comes to chemicals. Glyphosate is a big no-no in organic crops. Farmers who go organic have to get creative with how they handle weeds. They use things like crop rotation, mulching, and even mechanical tools to keep things clean and healthy without spraying harmful chemicals. This is why you'll find that organic produce generally has fewer pesticide residues compared to the conventional stuff. But don't be too relieved. Even though organic farms avoid glyphosate, there's still a chance it could end up on their crops. Think about it. We always said that glyphosate is everywhere. Sometimes, even during the transport or storage of organic produce, it can get a little bit contaminated. That's why even if an organic farm does everything right, there's always that tiny risk of exposure. And then there's the issue of misleading labels.
You may be thinking that you're getting something all natural, but that's actually not a label that is regulated. You take something like USDA organic, that's a regulated label. Now, albeit most of the brands still take advantage of that because USDA organic still means that only 80% has to be organic and 20% can still be whatever. But the point I'm trying to make here is that a lot of times when you're thinking you're getting something like grass-fed, that animal may have been grass-fed, but it wasn't raised grass-fed, meaning it was born into a livestock farm where the animals were literally shoulder to shoulder and they were fed genetically modified corn and soy, and then they took that animal at a certain age and then put it on the green pasture, let's say for 2 months. That's grass-fed. So don't be tricked by the front of the label.
Just because something says natural or eco-friendly doesn't mean it's organic. In fact, some natural foods still get sprayed with glyphosate, especially before harvest, to dry them out faster. That's why it's super important to look for certified organic labels, like USDA Organic, to really be sure you're getting a product that's glyphosate-free. Otherwise, many of these products don't technically break any laws, but they don't always live up to what consumers expect. You can see the result right now. A lot of people already started suing them, claiming the stuff caused cancer, particularly a type of cancer called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. One of the biggest cases was when a guy named Dwayne Lee Johnson sued them in 2018. A jury awarded him a whopping $289 million after he said glyphosate gave him terminal cancer. That number got reduced later, but it kicked off a lot of similar lawsuits. In 2019, a couple named Alva and Alberta Piliad won $2 billion in a case where they also claimed glyphosate caused their cancer. Bayer has ended up paying over $10 billion in settlements by 2023, and this whole thing is far from over. Governments around the world are taking different approaches. While the EPA in the US says glyphosate is safe if you use it right, more evidence keeps popping up about the cancer risks. So, it's a real battle between the companies, regulators, and the public. And it's not just about glyphosate. This is part of a bigger conversation about the harmful chemicals used in farming. Things like pesticides, herbicides, and GMOs.
As you go down this rabbit hole of eating healthy, what you would start to see is that as you get healthier, you become less tolerant of things that aren't healthy. So let's say, for instance, like they make papaya, but a large majority of papaya is GMO, like it's genetically modified. It comes from Hawaii, and most people don't know that. Well, if I decided that day to have a GMO papaya, I'm going to feel that. You see that? Like, I'm going to notice the difference.
It's going to be a shock.
Versus like somebody, Dave, who eats that papaya, he may be like, this is great.
I feel amazing.
So
I know, healthy out here. So put it on Instagram, healthy lifestyle.
Because what I believe is when you eat really healthy, it heightens your senses.
In another case, a Pennsylvania jury slapped Monsanto and Bayer with a $2.25 billion fine after they found Roundup, the glyphosate product, gave John McKivison cancer. He'd been using it for 20 years on his property. They said the product was defective, and Monsanto didn't warn people about the cancer risk. Monsanto's not backing down, though. They're planning to appeal, insisting Roundup is safe. The whole thing started after the World Health Organization came out in 2015, saying glyphosate could cause cancer, but Monsanto didn't agree, pointing to studies that say it's safe. But we can't risk our health by gambling on who's telling the truth. That's why we should choose the safest choice: organic foods. They're grown without all those harmful chemicals and pesticides, which means they're cleaner and packed with more nutrients that actually support our health. Choosing organic also means you're backing farming practices that are better for the environment, like healthier soil and protecting biodiversity. But it doesn't stop there. We need to push for stronger food safety rules. We should all be advocating for policies that ensure our food is free from harmful chemicals and bad practices. The best part? You can take action right now. Learn more about what's in your food, understand the labels, and make better choices. It's all about knowing where your food comes from and taking control of what you put in your body. As you just saw, glyphosate is poisoning billions, and the food industry is counting on your ignorance. Now that you know the truth, what will you do about it? Should glyphosate be banned from our food supply? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more shocking health insights. See you soon.